majesty, Messiah, majesty. Yeah. Every day, your praise will come from me, for your faithfulness towards me. Messiah, majesty. Every day, your praise will surely be a theme of joy for me, our Savior Almighty. Every day, your praise will come from me, for your faithfulness towards me. Messiah, majesty. Every day, your praise will surely be a theme of joy for me. Messiah, majesty. Yeah. For your giftings, I will praise you. For your lifting, I will worship you. For your giftings, I will praise you. For your lifting, I will worship you. And making me Messiah, majesty. He is glorifying me, Messiah, majesty. He's breaking and making me Messiah, majesty. He is glorifying me. Lift your voice again. Messiah, majesty.
The chief of everyone in New Jersey is actually here to speak to all of us so that we can put ourselves in a place of advantage. Amen. So not only what you can do in society, because they are here to protect and to serve us, but what can you do even as a person to also help them with their work, to also help them so that all of us can collectively make this place habitable and safe. Amen. Without further ado, can we all kindly please rise, even as we welcome Chief Zebrowski. God bless you, sir.
First and foremost, thank you so much today for inviting me, particularly Eunice for taking that opportunity. And I also want to thank O.C. King for this opportunity to spend time today, particularly at your Sunday school service. So, my name is John. I've been married for 34 years. My wife is Kim. I have 3 children, Matthew, Jonathan, and Jessica. I love my children dearly. What I'm going to explain in a few minutes is what I spoke to my children about as they were growing up, as they were becoming young adults, and how they should treat the world. But I want to say a couple things first. First, when I was listening to O.C. King before, he was talking about, in essence, I think, building bridges. That we couldn't just stay from where we came, but we had to be able to spread a message and move forward to other locations. And there were times when people would hate us, and people would not like us, and it would be difficult. Today, so let me back up. I'm a Catholic. So this morning at 7:30 in the morning, I went to Mass. Thank you. The gospel was very significant, I think very significant for me being here today. Because we were talking about the doubting Thomas, right? Thomas didn't believe. He had to be shown. I'm hoping with the opportunity today that you can help me change all those doubting Thomases. I know it's not simple. I know it's very complex. I know that it is very serious. But if we all work together and we all band together, I think those that doubt, that those that misunderstand, that we can convert them, that we could make each one of us understand, and ultimately, as O.C. King told me as we were walking in, treat everybody with respect. Yes. If we treat everybody with respect, we can change the world. Yes. I think with everything that's happened lately, with COVID, with everything else in this world, there's always somebody thinking this way and somebody thinking this way, but not enough people here talking about the same thing. I'm hoping today we can share an experience. I can share some information to you that might be helpful, and you might be able to share something that I don't know, that I can be able to talk to everybody else about as well. So thank you. And I won't take too long because I appreciate the opportunity. I know for my children, and even for me, having to be stopped by a police officer, whether it's on Broad Street, the Parkway, the Turnpike, or wherever it may be, it is a very uncomfortable situation. And to the point where there's a great deal of stress that goes on beforehand. If I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden I see someone behind me and maybe their lights and sirens aren't on, but they're right behind me, I'm uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable, right? So I'm going to go through a couple steps that maybe make you feel a little bit more comfortable, but more or less, I would ask you to share this information. Because if we don't share it, then it's not going to work, right? And I want to make our officers safe, but I want you as a driver, you as a passenger, and you as your children, and your children that are in that car, I want everyone to feel comfortable when that occurs. I hope it doesn't, but it might. That's reality. So hopefully we can go through this very quickly. We go to the next slide. I don't know if we can play this, but this is a message from Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal was born and raised in Newark. Right? Went on to a tremendous basketball career, won a bunch of championships with the Lakers, and now he's come back to Newark on many occasions, and I know he does a great deal of charity work. Tremendous representative. The message he was sharing today is this opportunity that we all have, and that is the opportunity to be able to talk about what seems to be just a simple incident, right? That simple moment when you have to get pulled over and you find out, oh my God, I'm going to get a ticket, or maybe I'm going to get a warning. And that's what Shaquille was explaining.
Shaq here. Nobody likes traffic stops, but if there's a stop, we all want it to be easy, smooth, and safe. Safe Stop is designed to provide education about your rights and knowing the law. If you're stopped by the police, things like staying calm and following the officer's instructions will make it a safe stop. Know your rights, know the law. Visit SafeStopNJ.com to learn more.
That Shaquille, who came from New Jersey himself, is putting himself up here to say and explain this incident for what this is all about. If we go to the next slide. First and foremost, if in fact, I'm sorry, I have with me today my best friend, Jack, okay? Could you come up? So my best friend, Jack, has worked with me for 30 years. And he's a captain with our police department in Saraville. Jack has 3 girls. And a lovely wife, Bev, who he loves very much. So he's going to help me. And I know, Jack, you've talked about this to your 3 girls, correct?
I have. I have 3 daughters from 31 down to 24. Thank you. I am too. I am married for 34, maybe 35 years. I'm not sure. I confuse it with the fact I've been a police officer for 34, 35 years, somewhere in there. Okay. Started in the city of Newark, and I ended up in Saraville. Okay.
Can I tell you a really wonderful story real quick? Please sit down. Okay. So for a period of time, I came up to Newark every day because I attended Seton Hall Law School. Okay. It is important. So I would travel the train each day because it was easy for the commute. And when I would sit on the train, I would study my stuff for law school because I didn't know how to go to work right after that, right? So one day I'm sitting all by myself, right, waiting for the train to come, and someone taps me on the shoulder. And I try to kind of just do my thing. I'm reading my notes and whatever, waiting for the train to come. And it turns out it's a young Jack. Right? And he says to me, he goes, I think I know you. I think I know where you're from Sayreville. And I said, yes, I am. He goes, well, I'm from Sayreville too. And he says, I'm working right now. And he goes, and I just want to make sure you're okay. And I said, listen, I'm doing fine. I got my head in the books and I'm just ready I'm waiting for the train to come. And he says, if you ever need me, I'm always here. And for me, that was a wonderful thing because I'm just sitting there and that just tells me what a tremendous person Jack was and is. I'd like to think that every one of our police officers emulate what Jack did for me that day on every occasion. But I had to tell you that story because for me, it made me feel like I was part of a community, right? Not just here, but sitting there, someone felt I was important. And everybody always has to feel they're important. Right? So I'm sorry that was off the subject, right? But it's very important that you know that. If in fact an officer is going to pull you over for a reason and you see the light and you hear the siren, what I would ask you to do is immediately, I know you everybody gets nervous and they go, I got to pull over right away. Usually, that officer had been following at a safe distance for a while, waiting for an area where they can actually have you pull off in a very safe manner. If for some reason you're uncomfortable, maybe you're on a bridge, maybe you're somewheres where there's a tremendous amount of traffic and there's no place to pull over, you have the opportunity to take the moment, pull over in a safe place. All right, find the shoulder of the road and where there's a lot of light. All right, so that you feel comfortable and feel safe in where you're pulling over, but also that officer behind feels safe when they're pulling you over as well. What's important is that, and you may say to yourself, I don't know where the officer's at, and all of a sudden that officer turns off on the passenger side of your car, and you go, and you're startled by that. Don't be startled by that. The only reason the officer walked over to the passenger side is number one, because usually his or her back is to the highway, and they're just trying to keep safe, and they're trying to keep you safe as well. So when they come to the right side or the passenger side, they also can see you as a driver and the whole interior of the car, which is really important, right? Because from the officer's standpoint, they're not sure as they're approaching. Maybe there's one person, maybe there's people in the back of the car. It's much easier to approach on that passenger side and to be able to look in. If we go to the next slide. Now, it's again, if you're stressed, and I understand, you have to do is take a big deep breath, right? And say, I understand it's coming. I'm not sure what it is, but in order for the officer to be able to explain the instructions that are coming up, you got to take that breath to be calm and listen to what they may be asking you to do. And I understand sometimes the officers can be very gruff and they're very direct in what they ask you. And there's a reason for that. They don't want to extend the conversation. They just want to be able to concentrate on what their job is to do as well and their responsibility. So the best suggestion I can have is, as soon as the officer does pull you over, take that big deep breath, because you know they're walking up, whether they're going to walk on the passenger or the driver's side, and listen to the instructions as soon as the officer begins to talk. Next slide. And what that officer is going to do is ask you for 3 items. He's going to ask you for, your Mr. Bean, which is your driver's license. Whether you have a valid registration and a valid insurance card. Now, it is the law. You're supposed to have those 3 things in your possession all the time. All 3, right? Insurance cards now can be online. So if you have it on your phone, it's okay. You can bring it up on your phone. Just understand though that the officer is going to say, "Okay, can I see your phone?" Right? Because sometimes we don't want to give that up, but you do have to have the opportunity to be at least show it and display it so they can see make sure that it's validly registered. But if you have those 3 items, you'll give them to the officer, and at that point, the officer is going to explain or should explain what the car stop was for. Okay? Next slide. What's important about that is if that officer starts asking you questions, you do not have to say anything. Beyond handing those 3 items, that's your responsibility. If you wish to tell the officer, I don't think I was doing that, or officer, can you explain what that was? You're welcome to do that. But if the officer starts asking you what I would call incriminating questions, you don't have to answer. That's your right. Okay? That's your right.
And John, that is common. I've been doing this a long time. And when I started, that didn't normally happen. People would just tell us and we would work from that. But today, people are smarter and they're learning this. And they once they give the license, registration, insurance, they know, and they're respectfully when they say it, I do not wish to speak anymore. It's not uncommon. The officers are hearing it regularly and they're getting used to it, and that's fine.
Yeah. And that officer shouldn't demand you say anything as well. Next slide, please. This is important, and I do this all the time, and I recommend this, and I've told this to all 3 of my kids. I said, when you get pulled over, do me a favor. Just put your hands on the same spot on the steering wheel that you were taught to do when you were first driving, right?
9 o'clock, 3 o'clock.
9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 10 and 2, whatever is easiest, but in that area where the officers can see your hands. Why? Because any type of movement becomes uncomfortable for that officer. Much the same as I'm sure it can be for you as well. But it is for the officer because as they're approaching, there's a lot of things going in their minds, right? And it's a lot easier if all of a sudden I see hands where they're at. It's a comfortable position on the steering wheel. You don't have to keep it that long, but at least till the officer approaches to you, I think it really removes any of the anxiety or stress that officer might have as they're approaching the car. Next slide. This is something that will happen from occasion. And this is where I know that I would be very stressed, and I think at some points where we would have a misunderstanding where things could get a little bit escalated if you're asked to be removed from the car. An officer has to have something called reasonable suspicion or probable cause to ask the driver or the passenger out of the car. They simply can't ask you to get out of your car, right? They may not tell you exactly what that reasonable suspicion is or what that probable cause is automatically. There may be a reason why, but they may be asking you to get out. My suggestion is to simply comply. Get out of the car, walk away, go to an area that's safe, and usually the officer will escort you. And that's the same thing for your passengers as well. Jack, anything on that?
No, that's, like you said, it's a difficult situation when you have to ask someone to step out of a vehicle. But it does happen from time to time, but it's not something as an officer I like to do. I didn't like taking people out of the car, but it does happen from time to time.
And if you refuse, they can forcibly remove you, and that shouldn't happen. It should be mutual respect and cooperation for that, right? Next slide. So, yes, and I think more than often, and Jack kind of alluded to this, that happens more often than not now. I know when an officer approaches a car, we see a lot of angry drivers. And rather just simply, as we suggested before, kind of just give your paperwork and documents and work through the process. We have a lot of people that want to tell us that we didn't see what we saw. We didn't have the radar done correctly. There was a lot of things that was wrong, and we had a misunderstanding, and we were the bad people. My suggestion for that simply is, if in fact you feel that you did not commit, whether it was driving too fast, whether it was making an improper turn, going through a stop line or something like that, that's what court is about. You have the ability to go and mutually and negotiate your your summons at court. And my suggestion is that's the best way to do it, because once an officer issues that summons to you, he can't take it. He or she can't take it back. He can't rip it up. They can't throw it away. So it's already done, and anything that goes beyond that point is really kind of just a dispute that would be best for a judge to be able to handle. More importantly, though, if you feel that that officer disrespected you, if you feel that that officer did not treat you correctly, if you feel that that officer violated your civil rights, there is another way to do that. Don't dispute it with the officer at the scene. Obviously, that's a person you don't want to deal with, and we don't want it to escalate to something else. But there's something called an internal affairs complaint that you can file. You don't have to file it at that precinct or that police department of that officer. You can go to your local precinct or your police department. You can go to your local county prosecutor's office. You can go to the state attorney general's office if you want. Wherever you most feel comfortable and where you think you're going to get the best redress, you can file that complaint. And I tell you, if you feel that officer wronged you, you should do that, because that's not an officer that we want patrolling our roads. How does that work? There's an official form. You have to fill it out. Every police department has to accept that form. You will not walk away without being able to fill that form out and having that form accepted. If for some reason a police department does that, you need to go somewhere else, because that's wrong. They will accept it, they will investigate it, and then they will tell you exactly what that investigation revealed. That is our obligation by law to do that way. So you should never walk away going, well, there's nothing I can do about it, because there is. And if there is an officer that shouldn't be acting in the way they are, it needs to be corrected, and we need your help in being able to do that. Not at the scene, though, and not as an angry bird, right? Next slide. These are a couple of tips, and actually Jack helped me draw these up because these are the ones that he spoke to his kids about, and I think they're absolutely correct. And this is really for our younger group. If, in fact, you're driving and you're listening to music, just turn it down a bit so that we can talk. Because if we can't talk and can't hear each other, then we just begin to scream. And when we scream, what happens? We get angry. So we don't want to be angry. We don't want to scream. If it's at night, turn your overhead lights on inside, your dome lights on side, because that way everything is lit up. You can see the officer and exactly what he's saying to you, he or she is saying to you, and they can see what you're doing as well. Roll down your driver's window. Now, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's brutally cold out, roll down your window at least to the point that the officer approaches, so that again, I can see your face and you can see my face. It's respect, right? I can't tell you how many times when I was on the road and somebody would roll it down an inch and a half, their windows were tinted, and I'm trying to talk into them and trying to explain something to them, and the radio's blaring and I can't hear anything. And it becomes difficult, right? And Jack, I'm sure you've experienced that too.
Correct. And the new thing that has started in the last 10 years is people being on the phone when we pull them over. And they're like, well, we'll talk to you when we're done with our phone call. Yeah. That's not real respectful either. So we all have to be nice to one another. And it works so much better when that happens.
Yeah. And finally, the most difficult thing I think to do, even for the officer, is stay calm, right? Because there's no doubt. My hands are wringing wet, right? My heart's pumping, right? Everything else, you're uncomfortable, because this is not an easy thing to do. But if you can just take that deep breath and stay calm, things go very quickly, and you'll be back on your way. If all goes well, that stop happens within just a short couple of minutes, and you move on. I can't say that you won't get a summons. It might happen. Maybe that maybe something did occur, and it was something that needed to be done, or maybe it's just a warning, or maybe they were just trying to give you some information about what was going on. Your headlight was out, your brake light was out, or something like that, and say, I don't think it's safe to drive that way. Those things happen. Our next slide. This was a very, this again, we can't play this, but this is Detective Kim Nelson Edwards. She's from the Montclair Police Department. She's a tremendous detective over there. And her message kind of summarized everything we talked about today. So
Hi, I'm Kim Nelson Edwards. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and I also happen to be a detective in Montclair, New Jersey. I want to talk about traffic stops. I've made plenty over the years, and I've been stopped myself. I understand how stressful they can be. The best things you can do in a traffic stop is to stay calm, know your rights, and know the law. Here's some other tips. Stay in your car. If it's dark, turn on your dome light. Make sure that your window is rolled down. Have your hands on the steering wheel. When the officer asks for your license, registration, and insurance card, please provide them. That's the law. If the officer asks you to exit the vehicle, please do it. Again, that's the law. If you feel that you didn't deserve to be pulled over or were treated unfairly, file a complaint. That's your right. Remember, my job is to keep everyone safe. To learn more, go to safestopnj.com.
so I apologize, but I will get those for you so that you can play those videos, because she's a really tremendous representative for the Montclair and also for every police officer in the state of New Jersey. So next slide, please. Questions? Does anybody have any questions for us?
I wanted to ask about the slide where you commonly ask people to step out their car. Do you like, what are typical reasons you will ask somebody to step out?
That's a great question. So the question is, how often, and is it typical, and what would be the reasons for it? It's not typical, not routine, and usually it's because there's a belief that there may be some type of item in the car that could be used as a weapon, or that there could be something called contraband, something that may be illegal that was in the car. If those are the cases, then the officer is going to act, particularly if the officer is fearful that there's something in the car that could harm them, they'll ask that the people in the car to get out and to move away to a safe area, usually a couple feet away from the car itself. But that's a great question. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for enlightening all of us. And there's something you repeated that I think was not really evident in the incidents that happened with police victims, which was, you said something about turning in the light inside the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in many of the videos we've seen being shown on the media concerning some of the police victims, usually they were always in a dark, shaded, and so I think that also stirred up suspicion, which you highlighted, that light must be on and park under the light. I thought that was very, very, very instructive for us, and many of us can make the mistake to just say, okay, let me just hurriedly park anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I thank you for bringing light that the police officer understands that you have to obey the law, and the law demands that you must park under a light. And when you were talking about being under on top of the bridge and all that, but park in a comfortable place where there is light, that was very, very instructive, because many of the cases that we have seen on TV, they usually take place in a dark place, and I think that somehow the victims did contribute to their demise then. Now, my question now is, you highlighted something about fear, and I think that it's something we all need to understand, those of us here, and we thank God for the law enforcement for what they do. And I think fear can also promote safety, where if the driver who is wrong, who is pulled over, realizes that the police officer pulling him over has some fear about him, I think he will also be careful in the way he responds, because the way it is being shown in the media, it seems to suggest that it is the person being pulled over that was really in fear and not the police officer. So it looks like it's like the predator and the prey now. And so, because what is being promoted seems to suggest that the driver is the one always in fear, but forgetting that the police officer also can be in fear, not knowing what is inside the car. So I think that aspect of light is very, very key. But now my question is, how does the police officer deal with his internal fears in how he or she makes judgment of the person? Because I think that there have been in cases, I mean, given your expertise over the years, I believe that there are cases where a police officer wrongly made a judgment and later realized that he made a wrong judgment. But something must have promoted that decision in him. So how does a police officer deal with his own personal fears, knowing that going out every day, he is not sure of coming back home? So how does he deal with fear in making judgment? What's the role of fear in decision making for the police officer?
I think, first of all, that's a tremendously great question. I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of ways. I think first and foremost, I think for an officer, just like anybody else, knowing that you're coming home every day to a family that loves you, that you can explain everything about how your day went. I know there were days that I would go home, and some days I was almost crying from what I saw for that day. You know, we see a lot of terrible things throughout the day, and having the opportunity to speak to somebody, my wife, was very helpful. Sometimes talking to my friend and saying, "Hey, what do you think, Jack? What was your impression about what happened today?" helps us as well. But we also have to be trained too, right? And one of the things that we've been doing lately, and we've done for every police officer in the state of New Jersey, is called de-escalation training. Yeah. Very, very important. And that's something that when you talk about making journey and when you talk about success, that success of de-escalate training has already occurred in other states. It takes place in other countries, and we're only learning about that now, and we're becoming very, we're not experts yet, but we're getting better at it. And it gives us the opportunity, really the opportunity to start with that idea of respect, but then the idea of how to talk to people. Very difficult today when we have young people growing up, and our police officers who are growing up, and it's easier to talk on the phone, to text, right? But not individually, right? Like we're doing today. That is a tremendous thing that we have to work on with our police officers, because if I respect you and we talk together, then most likely it's never going to escalate to a point where all of a sudden we don't like each other. We spend a great deal of time on that now, more so than ever. I mean, I know we do it with our own children, but as far as police officers concerned, that is a very, very big problem for us.
I agree with what the chief said. Walking up to a car on a dark night by yourself, any officer says he wasn't scared isn't being completely truthful, because you don't know what's in the car. You have windows that are tinted. You have a dark area. So by doing these suggestions here, it lowers the stress for the driver, and it also lowers the stress for the officer. So we can just bring the stress down and keep everybody calm. And I walk up to a car and I see the interior light on at night, I immediately think this person knows a police officer. Okay, because somebody taught them how to do that, like I taught my children. Put those interior lights on, get that window down, put your hands up. Put your hands where the officer can see them, just on the wheel, nothing crazy. It makes a huge difference. And then we can all treat each other the way we're supposed to, and we can go on our way. But it is a scary situation.
Yes.
All right, so about what you said about, like, you know, if an officer does something bad to you, to, like, you know, go report it and stuff. So, you know, most people know that the system is corrupted and stuff. Like, what if you go to every place you could go, but still you can't get justice? What would you do?
You know, that's why we're talking today, because we want we want this discussion, because I don't want that to ever happen. And I'm not going to tell you it hasn't happened, because I think it has happened. I know it has happened. But we're working very hard to ensure that when you do come in, you're comfortable, that you feel that you can express yourself, and that you get a resolution from what it is. If Newark, if Bloomfield, if any other police department doesn't accept that, you can come to my police department, and I guarantee you that will happen. That's not the answer you want to hear. I understand it, but that's the first step, all right? And that's what we're working on here, is that I want you to feel comfortable doing that, because you have the right to do that, right? That's the only way we can correct bad behavior. So I'm hoping that that's something that you didn't experience yourself, and if you did, I feel bad, and I would like to correct that. But somebody must have, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. I assure you, there are police departments, there are prosecutor's offices, and our attorney general will listen for those complaints. Okay.
Okay, so there has been times when, you know, when you said to, like, put your hands visible where the police officer could see it, there has been times where, like, people have really done that. Say there's somebody in the passenger seat with them too, right? And they ask them, can you, like, get the registration stuff and everything, and they try to bring it out from that little Dropbox thing. Why is it like the police officer like goes ahead? Because I've seen it. They be like, they'll tell them to bring it out, but then they'll be the same people to be like, put your hands where I can see it. You're bringing out a weapon, blah, blah, blah. You know, why do they do that?
I think part of that is fear on the officer's part because they're not comfortable in that situation, but that shouldn't mean that you shouldn't be comfortable in that situation. That's part, again, what we're trying to overcome at this point. You're right. It's confusing if an officer tells you, or if you're told, put your hands on the wheel and don't say anything, and then all of a sudden someone's barking orders at you, and now you're confused. I'm not sure I know how to get over that, other than to stay calm, so that an officer doesn't escalate and basically say, "I'm trying to follow what you're asking me to do. If you could just repeat your directions, I'll try to be able to do what I best to help you out." I don't think every encounter is always wonderful, and that's part of what we're trying to change. Jack, any comment on it?
No, but one of the things that we talked about on the way here was the cameras.
Oh, yeah.
Today. Do you want to go into that?
No, you go. Well, yes. One of the best things that I think has happened for all of us, and at first I will tell you, I was kind of against this, was everybody wearing a body-worn camera. And the reason why I first thought it was not a good idea is because I figured, you know what, officers are going to act differently, and they shouldn't act differently whether there's a camera on them or not, right? But what we have found is that not only does the officer act differently, but even the passenger and the driver does as well. There's an understanding that everything is recorded by what occurs. I think a lot of what you were discussing before probably doesn't happen as often anymore, because an officer's understanding of what his actions are, as well as everybody else, and it is clear that there's a video that records everything. So if you come into our police department and say, well, Officer John disrespected me, we can go directly to that video now and say, well, okay, he did or he didn't, and you get to see that video as well, which is very important. All right, so not only how I act, but how everybody else acted at that time. Much the same as even if you had your camera out. We have that all the time where we pull someone over and they have their camera on. And most times they'll even tell us, just so you know, I'm recording this car stop. That's okay, because the officer's going to say, well, we're obligated to do the same. So I think that balance has helped out a great deal too.
And one of the things we found, since we've been doing the body cameras and the car cameras, is we'll have people come in to make a complaint about an officer's demeanor, such as, we'll watch the video, we'll bring them in, and we'll explain the video to them, and it turns out it may have just been a misunderstanding on the driver's part, not understanding why the officer did what he did. We're very fortunate we have people in internal affairs positions that will explain it very well, and most of the time, not all the time, I can't speak to all the time, but most of the time, the driver leaves and they're appreciative that we took the time to explain it to them. Other times, there's certain people we can't help. They're not happy.
Yeah. Young lady, what's your first name? Miriam. Thank you so much for all these questions. I want to, honestly, because you have to be that steward at some point to either deliver the message or not deliver the message, what we're trying to do here, right, when it comes to respect. You're delivering a great message to me, because I will tell you that we won't tolerate bad behavior by our police officers. I'm not saying that doesn't occur, because it does, and we know it does, and we're trying to correct that. But if you don't stand up as you did today to me, and not stand up, but ask those questions so that you can be able to communicate to others, it won't happen. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have two questions. The first one, I noticed when you said that they're pulling over a driver, they gotta pull over at a safe place. But sometimes the safe place maybe like half a block, and the driver is slowly driving to pull up to where it's light and we're safe. But then the police consider that he's running away, and then they say they're gonna give him a ticket for fleeing. And you could see that the guy just explained to the police officer, I'd rather feel safe if I pull in a place where it's lighted and there's people could see me, because I'm afraid of you. And nobody can see what's going on, but I feel safer if I pull in a safe place where lights and people can see me. But then the cops still give them a hard time, take them out of the car and, handcuff them and say that they were fleeing. When you see that, you see that, that wasn't right.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But right at the scene is not the place where that young man or young girl should argue with the officer either. That's the point where, if you're issued a summons or if you were taken in as arrest, that's where a prosecutor and a defense attorney will assist and explain to a judge what those actions were and why someone decided to take that extra time to pull over in a very safe place. Because I agree with you, you're correct on that. It's also the opportunity for that internal affairs, if in fact that officer really didn't have a right to do what they did afterwards. Not at the scene, but there are times I don't agree with, but in most cases, each officer would understand, because they probably were following for a while to make sure that there was an area that was well lit to be able to pull over.
My next question is, why is there so much suicide in the police department? So many police are committing suicide.
Well, I think part of that, thank you for asking that, because in my department, while I was chief, I did have an officer that committed suicide. And that was, and he had two very small children and a wife, and we don't really know to this day what were the circumstances as to what made him feel that way to do that. There were several officers who were his best friends that found him. And our whole department, all our officers really are still mourning his loss. So I thank you for that. I think the real answer to that is we didn't do a good job for many, many years giving our police officers the right mental health support and health support that they need to be able to say, I just was involved in something. It made me feel really uncomfortable. I don't know what to do about it. I think many of our officers decided instead that they would keep it inside. They turned to alcohol. They turned to other things. And then at some point, they didn't feel that it was manly to express themselves. I'd like to think that we have programs now which are called, and we have officers called resiliency officers that teach ways on how to talk to each other, how to seek help, and when you have conflict in your mind, to how to have better nutrition so we feel better, we're physically fit. I'm not saying every officer is, but we do. I think we've done a better job of taking that trauma, and it is trauma that we see. I can't tell you, it's hard to explain when you go to a scene of a motor vehicle accident and you see a young child that's killed or perished because of that or something like that. You go to a fire and you see what occurs because of that, and you have to internalize it. It becomes very difficult. I think we've done a better job of that. I don't think we were doing a great job of that. And I think that's why it's a very high percentage in our profession right now. So thank you for that question in particular.
First, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to come here. But I do have a question. Something you touched upon. You said the young people, youth. Amen. So you said the young people, youth. So I wanted to know, are there any implementations, like any plans that people, like police officers, we can bring people who are young, like us, who can now teach you the ways of the young people, so you can now understand how young people behave when they drive, how they play their music, stuff like that, so cops can now lessen the fear that they have on their part when they pull over a young person. Are there ways that stuff like that can be implemented to help you guys be less fearful, because even as young people come, they're fearful, and even as you guys come to pull over young people, you're fearful as well. So, are there any implementations that cops can now do to include the young people, so we can now tell you the certain actions that young people can do when it comes to how they drive, whatever they do that they drive? So yeah, that's my question.
There isn't. There has to be. And I think Eunice is here to start that. And we'll start that in our police department. That's absolutely, I think that, I don't know how we put that together, but I would love to put together, because I think you're right. I mean, there's an awful lot of times where we come together and we discuss what our concerns are, but we don't hear back. I would love to be able to start a program such as that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hello, this question is a little off topic, but look, I just wanted to ask this. You know how people be skipping red lights, right? And then they get pulled over, to get a ticket and all that. So what if you're driving around 1, 2 a.m. in the morning and there's no other vehicle? Maybe you see a few vehicles passing by, but you skip the red light and you see a cop pulls you over. Is he going to give you a ticket, or is that... I mean, there's no cars, there's no traffic. You get what I'm saying? Right. Can't you just skip it, since...
First of all, thank you for that question. You're going to get the ticket. You may not if you explain it to him and he listens and he understands, but the same thing happens if the law's the law. If you run a red light, you're going to get a ticket. Sorry.
And I think part of, just so you know, I think part of the understanding to that is it's like anything else, it's repetition, right? So if it's a busy day, you automatically say, I'm going to stop. If it's at night and nothing's going on, you may not. But if it all becomes all of a sudden a little bit of discretion, there'll be times when I am and sometimes that I won't. There could be that time when someone's crossing that street, right? Or someone else has the right of way, and you said, well, I didn't really see anything. It's really kind of this time of day. So Jack's kind of right. In the end, do I know if he's going to give you a ticket? He might just give you a warning. He might just say, hey, listen, you know what? I understand it's the time of day and it's not that big a deal. But I think from the bigger picture is if we just kind of practice stopping at the stop sign, stopping at the red light, turning when we're supposed to, not turning, it becomes good practice, right? Practice that I know that I tell my sons and daughters all the time, and then we don't even have to worry about whether someone's going to pull us over or not. And we keep people safe, right? I mean, that's ultimately what this is about, right? Is making sure everybody is safe.
Thank you so much, Chief Zebrowski and Captain Jack. Thank you so much. My question, I actually want to know if it's illegal to have your license plate, because I've seen people that have a license plate that they don't want police officers to read. Is it illegal to have such a thing?
Supposed to be 2 license plates on the car, front and back. One of the issues that has come up is sometimes yeah, right. Technically, not technically, but yes, by law, you're not supposed to have anything on your license plate or around your license plate that would prohibit somebody from at a safe distance being able to read your license plate. So there are decorative tintings. That becomes an issue only because, particularly when you get a glare from headlights and all, it's hard to see, although it looks really nice. And also, there are times where you lease your car, drive your car, or buy your car, and the dealer gives you these nice license plate holders, and they obscure part of the plate. Believe it or not, they're not supposed to be giving those out. You should be able to see all the digits that are on your license plate, and you should have one on your front and your back. 2 license plates.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I actually would like to thank you, Chief Zebrowski and Captain Jack, because this information definitely blessed me. And with this knowledge, not only will my life be better, but my children's lives will be better, and my generation's lives will be better. And honestly, I genuinely appreciate you guys for taking the time out to explain this to us, because this is knowledge people at my age really do need. And it's going to benefit all of us in significant ways. Even as we go to spread out the word, this is things that we can teach people who are of our same age group, so thank you. And I like how you mentioned where we should keep our hands during a traffic stop. And then 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Yes. So my question is, for me personally, I like to keep my driver's license in my wallet, so that would create a motion as if I'm reaching for something. So my question to you is, where is the best places to keep my license and my car insurance within my car?
Good question. Jack, you want to handle that, or you want me to?
That is an excellent question, first of all. My thing, what people did with me a lot when I was many years ago pulling people over, they would say, "Officer, I'm going to reach for my license right now." And I'd say, "Okay." I'd say, "Where's it at?" He'd say, "Oh, it's in my wallet, my back pocket." And he would go and reach back and hand it to me. If you could just communicate to the officer, say, "Officer, I'm going to reach for my wallet now." Okay. That officer likes that. Okay, it takes a little stress off of him. And I'm going to go into the glove box to get my registration and insurance. Is that okay? And the officer will say, "Sure, go ahead." So now he knows exactly why you're doing what you're doing. It's a much better ending for everybody.
Great question.
It's not a question, so I would just want to say thank you, because thank you for sharing this information with us. I'm type of person, like, if I got pulled over, like, I don't never like to comply. I'll always be on defensive mode. And these information will actually improve me a lot. And I guess next time, if I got pulled over, and I will behave and will do better next time. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
My second question is that, okay, what if you're the driver and your child is going through a serious condition, like maybe she can't breathe or asthma, blah blah blah, and you're rushing, like you're in a rush to get to the hospital, but then it's still practically the same thing I'm saying, but
that does happen, and that has happened.
Police pull people over.
Yeah.
Would they still get a ticket, or would they consider what's going on, because the parent, maybe the mom, is in a rush to help her child, you know what I'm saying?
No respectable police officer would give a ticket. What that officer should be doing is giving first aid right away, instructing you to call 911 so that we can get an EMT or EMS or an ambulance right to you right away. And if you're right by the hospital, that officer may actually escort you, or more likely probably bring your child, and whether it's you or your wife, in that car as well to get you to the hospital. No respectful police officer is going to issue a summons. Don't tell me someone did.
Personal question. So basically, I'm just interested. I want to know, in the conditions, you said that you've cried over some stuff and stuff. I want to know, have you been in a really intriguing situation whereby you didn't really know what to do? I don't know if you understand my question. Have you been in a situation with somebody, I wouldn't say dangerous, almost that, but whereby you didn't know what to really do, you were scared?
Yeah, many times actually.
What did you do?
Well, sometimes I let my instinct take over and my training take over and just try to react to whatever it might have been. Usually I have a partner or several other officers that are there. So if for some reason I'm uncomfortable, they kind of tag me out and say, "Hey, listen, I have that." That's very common now. If it's just one-on-one, sometimes maybe I just have to deal with whatever that situation is, and hopefully I made the right decision. I'm usually not someone that overreacted anyways by nature, so probably didn't. But I've had situations where people have been combative to me. I've been beat up. I've come home, I've gone home with, bloody nose, bloody lips, stuff like that. I mean, that happens. That's part of what our job is, though, right? I mean, there are times that we deal with people not at their very best. And not because that person disliked me. Maybe they were going through, right, maybe it could have been an emotional issue. Maybe they have a mental health issue. And we're learning how to deal with those a little bit better. But I've had those situations where no matter how much I talk to someone, no matter how much my instinct tried to go on, it didn't work. As a police officer, I don't, I understand I'm there to help someone. So you do the best you can. I couldn't walk away. I can't run away. We just kind of have to work through it. And yeah, there have been many times where I go, this isn't good. I'm not comfortable here, but my job is that I have to, and you do it. I don't know if that answers that for you or not. Look, everybody is a human being. We all have fear. We all have all this. We all have emotion. We may not show it, and it may be a little bit easier, or not easier, but you might say, well, you're wearing this uniform, you've got a gun, you've got a baton, you've got this and everything else. How in the world, because can you feel emotion or feel anything else? But we do. No one wants to use their gun. No one wants to use any of the other stuff. I understand it's part of what we have to do. But in the end, I have the same feelings that you may have, right? I may be very uncomfortable in the same interaction that you and I have. You may be intimidating to me, right? But I still have to be able to do what I have to do. My job, right? Not more, right? Not more, but at least respectfully do it. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah.
First of all, I'd just like to say I'm honored to have you guys here. This is something that is really, really important and interesting. And I myself has been pulled over a few times before in the past. And I thank God that it was like it was smooth. Like you guys said in the PowerPoint, stay calm. And that was the first thing I always did. And another thing I always did was greet the officer. When the officer comes up to my car, I will greet them. I make sure my window was down. So I didn't leave anything or act suspicious or anything to make them, judge or react a certain way. I was always calm about it, and I gave them all of my information and stuff, and and that was fine. But my question is, let's say an officer pulls someone over for whatever the reason is, and they do not issue a ticket. Does the officer still keep a note of that in the system?
Well, I don't know if every department does this, but I know in our police department that if, in fact, one of our police officers makes a car stop, we have something called a log. So every interaction is logged, only to the fact that it indicates or memorializes that it occurred, right? Not the circumstances of what took place. So, for instance, if you weren't issued a ticket on a car stop, but you go home and afterwards you're discussing it with whoever, and they go, that wasn't right, what that was. And you decide to contact us, that's at least a record to begin with to indicate, to show that it did occur, right? So someone doesn't go, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. There's no record of that. Now, not every department will do that yet. We're called what's called an accredited department. So our department has certain standards that we have to meet, and we're judged on those standards. So there's another body that actually looks at what we do, and we're required to do those stop logs. That's becoming more and more available to every police department, but that's at least what we do. So yes, it's not going to say exactly what occurred, because that shouldn't be necessary at that point, but it will at least memorialize that it did occur in case for some reason we need to follow up afterwards, whether you instituted or otherwise. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentations. I do have a question, and it's also like a follow-up with this question in regards to having a camera or recording the incident, either from the police, from the policeman or woman, or from the passenger, him or herself. Is it ideal or permitted to have camera rolling from both parties, either parties?
Yes, you are permitted to have your camera running at any time. The officer cannot take your phone away from you unless you're using your phone in a manner in which that could actually harm the officer. But if you're just saying, hey, I'm recording this conversation, like I said a little earlier, the officer's probably also going to say, just so you know, we are too. Because there's every officer that in the state of New Jersey now have a body camera on them, right? Particularly when they're having interaction on a car stop. So yes, you can. It's okay to record it. Sometimes when it goes on Facebook or it goes on Instagram or whatever, we don't necessarily like it, but it's your right to do. But it's certainly your right to record just as much as we're recording it as well.
So I just want to thank both of you, sir, a vote of thanks to both of you for reaching out and making out time for us in your busy schedule. And I would like to humbly request if you would like to come back again. We will be
Anytime.
honored to have you guys again. And we want to see how we can be doing this consistently, and then new updates. When you come over, you can update us so that we all know how to be at our best in how we relate outside with the officers. And I just want to thank you, sir. Thank you both for your kindness.
Yep.
And so to our folks, any question you have, write it down. They will come back again. And we're honored. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you. It was our pleasure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Messiah, Majesty, Messiah, Majesty, yeah. Every day, your praise will come from me, for your faithfulness was me.